Don't worry, there's a method to at least some of this madness. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. Today, we're going to answer that age-old question. How should you go about writing a novel? What method should you choose? Novel writers can broadly be broken into two camps. You have the pantsers or discovery writers who just sit down and write with little or no planning while presumably not wearing pants. And you have the fully clothed outliners or plotters or architects who sit down to write a novel with some kind of structured plan for how the story plays out. What method you choose is a matter of personal preference, but the kind of novel you're writing is also a consideration. So to help you make that decision, I'm going to present 3 questions that you should ask yourself. Starting with, is your novel plot heavy or premise heavy? Almost every single novel out there has some kind of plot, but how much of a part that plot plays in the novel varies quite a bit. Some novels instead rely on delivering a premise, and the enjoyment of that story comes out of the consumption of that premise rather than the events of the plot described in the novel. Take a story like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. That book has a plot, there's a conflict and a resolution, but the main focus of that work is the premise of the world that gets presented. He's created an intricate and interesting world, and the novel focuses more on that rather than an exciting, riveting plot with a bunch of revelations. A lot of Stephen King's novels are very heavily premise-driven. A lot of literary fiction is usually premise-driven as well. Something like Rebecca, on the other hand, is more heavily plot-focused because a major thrust of that story, the biggest impact of that novel, has more to do with what's learned through the course of the plot than the overall premise of the story. Mysteries are, I think, the best example of a plot-heavy story, and Rebecca is a bit of a mystery, so that part fits. But these are stories where the revelations and the events of the plot are more of the main focus. Because premise-heavy stories are about exploration and discovery, they arguably lend themselves well to pantsing. Plot-heavy stories, unsurprisingly, lend themselves better to plotting because they depend more heavily on events early in the story affecting events later on in the story. Figuring out all these plot intricacies and how all the threads hang together is perhaps better handled through an outline. Now, these are just general rules, and there are certainly premise-heavy books that get written from an outline and plot-heavy books that get pants. But this is definitely something to consider. If your novel is premise-heavy, that doesn't mean you should or need to pants it, but those kinds of stories lend themselves better to pantsing. Same thing if your novel is more plot-heavy. You can pants it, but if you have a very intricate, very detailed plot that has all these different chains of events and things, you might have an easier time if you outline that story rather than pants it. Next question, and this has more to do with your writing process than the novel itself. Does writing for you mean creating ideas or capturing ideas? Do your ideas come during your writing sessions or outside of them? Discovery writers tend to love the freedom to let their stories take them somewhere unexpected. Their best work comes from not being restricted by an outline. They create stories as they write them. Outliners or plotters, on the other hand, create their stories before actually writing them, before actually making prose happen. For them, the process is more about bringing an idea to fruition on the page. They are more likely to have their best ideas come outside of a writing session. So an outlining process where those ideas can be captured and then used to guide a writing session is a bit better fit. For a discovery writer whose ideas come as they're writing, they may need a writing session in order to get those ideas out. For a plotter, their ideas may come outside of a writing session, so having an outlining process or some way that they're capturing ideas before writing might be a better fit for them. This is a subtle difference and very nuanced, but I think it's something that you have to consider and figure out for yourself. For me, a lot of my creative ideas happen when I'm not writing, so capturing stuff in an outline or in notes is really important. My writing process is almost more mechanical because I'm trying to transcribe an idea I've already had into a scene. Someone who's more of a discovery writer would be finding those ideas as they write. This is not black and white, and there's all sorts of nuances in this, but I think a major determinant of plotting versus pantsing is when your best creative ideas happen. If it's outside of your actual writing session, then outlining makes more sense for you. It makes sense to have a process where you're sitting down and aggregating ideas into something like an outline. If your best ideas happen while you're actually writing, then pantsing is perhaps a better method because you can use your writing session to trigger those ideas. And the last question that you should ask yourself, do you like puzzles? One common reason pantsers give for pantsing is that their legs get too sweaty when wearing pants. And also they like being unrestricted, which also has to do with not wearing pants. Some folks find it hard to write when there's an expectation for what scene they need to create. For them, this leads to stilted writing. It maybe feels too mechanical. They feel boxed in by having to move the story in a specific direction. Other writers like to have a goal, some kind of path to follow. For them, knowing where a scene is going allows them to write it better because they have a goal that they're working towards. It's the difference between painting a picture or building a picture out of puzzle pieces. Both ways are challenging, but they're challenging in different ways. I have absolutely no evidence to support this, but I have a half-baked theory that the more artsy, fartsy, creative soul type writers tend to be pantsers, whereas the logical, puzzle-loving type writers tend to be more outliners. Writing a novel as a pantser is much more like painting a picture on a blank canvas. Writing a novel from an outline is a lot more like fitting a puzzle together because you have goals and a thing that you're trying to achieve and you're trying to find a path to achieve those goals. Some people like the freedom of not working within a system. Others like the challenge of working within a system. The limitations imposed by an outline are a driver for creativity for those who like working within systems rather than a hindrance. Now, outliners go through that same blank canvas process when they're writing their outline. Pantsers just do it while they're writing the actual novel, so maybe the metaphor falls apart a little bit. But I do think this idea of whether you love the open, unrestricted creativity or the creativity of working within a system, even if it's a system that you've designed yourself because you're the one who's writing the outline, I think that's a major determinant of whether pantsing or plotting is the best idea for you. Ultimately, this decision probably has more to do with personal preference, and you can write any novel using any method, and the best method is the method that you like the most. So use the things I've talked about in this video to help guide you, but ultimately use the process that you most enjoy, use the process that allows you to produce the best work. Don't feel like you have to do something because you think or work in a certain way. Make your process work for you. Just like this video is going to stop working soon because we're at the end of it and the video will stop playing once we get to the end of it. So there you have it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about novel writing methods in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.